The numbers simply don't add up. A cup of brewed coffee, at its core, is water and roasted beans. By most industry estimates, the raw ingredients in a basic cup of coffee cost somewhere in the range of a few dimes. Add milk, add a flavored syrup, add a name scrawled on a cup, and the price on the board still climbs past $5, sometimes past $7, for a drink that took less than a minute to make. James is standing in line, third from the register, phone in one hand, wallet in the other. He's done this same walk 100 times, order a grande something, tap his card, wait by the counter, hear his name called out, sometimes right, sometimes not even close. Today, though, he actually looks at the price on the little digital menu behind the register, $7 and change, for a cup of coffee. He glances down at the paper cup he's holding from yesterday, still sitting in his car's cup holder, and does something he's never bothered to do before. He pulls up a coffee bean calculator on his phone and tries to work out what the actual coffee inside that cup cost the company to make. The number he lands on is nowhere close to $7, not even close enough to explain the gap with milk, or cups, or napkins, or rent. Something isn't adding up, and James can't stop thinking about it standing right there in line. So today's business file opens with a question that sounds almost silly to ask out loud. Why does a company charge that much for something that costs so little to make? And why does almost nobody in that line ever stop to ask? Before we open this file any further, hit like, drop a comment with your own guess at why this works, and subscribe with notifications on, because the answer to this one is stranger than most people expect. To understand what's really happening in that cup, you have to go back to 1971, to a single store in Seattle's Pike Place Market. 3 founders, Jerry Baldwin, Zev Siegel, and Gordon Bowker, opened a shop that, in its earliest years, didn't even serve brewed coffee to drink on the spot. It sold whole beans and equipment. The idea was almost the opposite of today's Starbucks. Educate people on quality beans, send them home to brew it themselves. The turn that actually built the company we recognize today didn't come from the founders. It came from a salesman named Howard Schultz, who joined the company in 1982 to help run marketing. In 1983, on a work trip to Milan, Schultz walked into an Italian espresso bar and noticed something that had nothing to do with the coffee itself. He noticed the room. Baristas who knew regulars by name. Strangers lingering, talking, treating the bar like an extension of their living room. Schultz came home convinced that Starbucks was sitting on something much bigger than beans, and the original founders, wanting to stay a retailer of beans and machines, didn't agree. That disagreement mattered enough that Schultz left the company. In 1985, he started his own coffee bar chain, Il Giornale, built entirely around the Italian-style experience he'd seen in Milan. It worked well enough that when the original Starbucks founders decided to sell the company in 1987, Schultz was the one who bought it, for roughly $3.8 million, and merged it with his own chain, keeping the Starbucks name. From 11 stores in 1987, the company would eventually grow into a chain of tens of thousands of locations across the world. By some counts, close to 40,000 today. But the part of that growth story people tend to skip past is this. Schultz wasn't scaling a coffee recipe. Recipes are easy to copy. Any competitor with an espresso machine could do that within a year. What Schultz was actually scaling was much harder to copy. A room, a mood, a specific feeling of being welcome to sit down and stay a while. You can franchise a menu overnight. You cannot franchise a feeling nearly as easily, and that gap is exactly where this story starts to get interesting. Think about it the way you'd think about a neighborhood diner versus a 5-star restaurant serving the exact same plate of eggs. The eggs cost roughly the same to buy wholesale either way. What's different is everything wrapped around the eggs. The tablecloth, the lighting, the server who greets you by name, the sense that you're paying for more than breakfast. Starbucks took that same logic and applied it to something people already bought every single day: coffee. That's what made the model so powerful. It didn't need to convince anyone to try something new. It only needed to convince people that the version they already loved was worth paying more for. Here's the challenge that should have made this whole plan fall apart. Coffee, as a raw commodity, is genuinely cheap. Anyone with a drip machine and a bag of beans from the grocery store can make a passable cup for well under $1. That means Starbucks was about to ask customers to pay several times over what they could pay to make the same basic drink at home, while also paying for expensive real estate on busy corners, trained staff, rent in some of the priciest retail strips in the country, and eventually, a sprawling menu of custom drinks that take real time and real skill to make. Any accountant looking only at the cost of beans, milk, and cups would tell you the math looks upside down. If coffee itself is the product, this business shouldn't survive contact with a grocery store aisle, selling the same beans for a fraction of the price. Add in the cost of prime real estate on busy street corners, hourly wages for every barista behind the counter, and the sheer number of hands that touch a single custom drink before it reaches you, and the profit margin should be razor thin at best. And yet Starbucks didn't just survive that comparison. It became one of the most recognizable and valuable brands in the world, with tens of thousands of stores and customers who return multiple times a week, sometimes multiple times a day, happily paying a premium that, on paper, none of the ingredients can justify. So here's the next question worth sitting with. If the coffee itself can't explain the price, what actually can? James starts paying closer attention to what happens after he places his order. Not to the drink, to everything around it. The comfortable chairs, the soft lighting, the playlist that never feels like it's trying too hard, the outlet by his elbow, the barista who, after enough visits, starts remembering his usual order before he finishes saying it. None of that costs him anything extra on the receipt. All of it is baked into the price he already paid. He notices something else too. Nobody is rushing him. There's no visible timer, no sign telling him to finish up and free the table. A fast food counter wants you gone in 10 minutes so the next customer can sit down. This place seems built around the opposite goal, keeping him there. That's a strange thing for a business to want, unless staying is somehow the point rather than the problem. This is where the story stops being about coffee and starts being about real estate. Not in the way McDonald's uses real estate, but in a quieter, more psychological sense. Schultz himself gave this idea a name early on: the third place. Not home, where you're part of a family. Not work, where you're part of a company. Somewhere in between. A place to sit, think, work, meet a friend, or simply exist in public without needing a reason. Schultz built Starbucks stores to function as that third place on purpose, down to the furniture and the music. Here's the part that makes this click. A coffee shop selling only coffee has to compete on the price of coffee. A coffee shop selling a place to belong doesn't have to compete on price at all. Because nobody comparison shops a feeling. You don't check the going rate for a comfortable chair with good lighting for 45 minutes. You just pay what's on the board, because what you're actually buying was never listed as a line item. Let's pause the money question for a second, because there's a second clue hiding in that same cup James is holding, the name written on the side. It seems like a small, forgettable detail, maybe even a minor annoyance when they spell it wrong, but baristas writing a customer's name on every single cup, every single day, across tens of thousands of stores, is a deliberate piece of behavioral design. It turns an anonymous transaction into something that briefly feels personal. It's the same instinct behind a favorite bartender remembering your order, small, cheap to deliver, and disproportionately effective at making people feel seen. If you're starting to piece together why this works, drop your theory in the comments before we get to the full answer. And if this kind of hidden strategy is new to you, go ahead and share this one with a friend who orders the same drink every morning without ever asking why. Put those two clues together, the room designed to be worth lingering in, and the name written on the cup designed to make you feel like a regular, and you start to see the outline of something bigger than a beverage company. Starbucks built a loyalty system around identity and ritual long before it built a rewards app. The Starbucks Rewards program, with its stars and its personalized offers inside the mobile app, is really just the digital version of the same instinct. Make the customer feel known. Make coming back feel like resuming something rather than starting over. And this is where the full picture locks into place. The $7 was never really the price of hot water and ground beans. It was the price of a reserved seat in a room built specifically to make you want to stay in it, handed to you by someone who already knows your name and your order. Starbucks isn't in the coffee business the way a grocery store is in the coffee business. It's in the business of selling a small, repeatable, affordable version of belonging, and coffee just happens to be the ticket that gets you in the door. Compare that to a movie theater charging far more for popcorn than any grocery store would dare. Nobody's actually paying $6 for corn kernels and butter. They're paying for the 2 hours of story that come with it, and the popcorn is simply the object the payment gets attached to. Starbucks built the same trick around coffee, except instead of 2 hours in a dark room, it sells 15 minutes of belonging you can pick up again tomorrow morning, and the morning after that, for the rest of your life. That's the real business lesson sitting inside that overpriced cup. Price rarely reflects the cost of the ingredients. It reflects the value of everything surrounding the ingredients. The room, the ritual, the recognition, the convenience of not having to think about where to sit for the next hour. Any business that only competes on the cost of raw materials is fighting a battle it can lose to the cheapest competitor on the block. A business that sells an experience, a feeling, or a sense of belonging is competing on something almost nobody can undercut, because it isn't for sale anywhere else at any price. This is exactly why Starbucks' current leadership has spent the last couple of years talking openly about reclaiming the third place, returning to comfortable seating, ceramic mugs for people staying in store, and a slower, more personal pace at the counter, after years of leaning hard into speed and mobile pickup windows. When a company that big publicly worries about losing the feeling of its stores, that's about as clear a confirmation as you'll get that the feeling was the actual product all along, not a side effect of selling coffee. Think about the last time you paid extra for something and couldn't quite explain why, other than that it felt worth it in the moment. A gym membership you rarely use, but keep because canceling feels like giving something up. A subscription you renew without checking the price. A seat at a restaurant you'd never cook that meal at home to save money instead. Even a hair salon charging triple what a home haircut kit would cost isn't really selling scissors and a chair, it's selling 20 minutes where someone else is taking care of you. Somewhere in nearly every industry, the most successful companies figured out the same secret Starbucks figured out decades ago. Sell the feeling, and the price stops being the thing people argue about. James takes one more look at his cup. His name spelled almost right, the chair across from him still warm from whoever sat there before, and realizes he's not going to see a coffee shop the same way again. Not because the coffee changed, because he finally noticed what he'd actually been paying for the whole time. File closed. Starbucks was never really selling coffee. It was selling a seat at the third place, and coffee was just the price of admission. If this file changed how you'll look at your next coffee run, hit like and subscribe with notifications on so you catch the next one the moment it drops. Drop a comment telling us the last thing you paid extra for without really knowing why. We want to hear your story, and we might feature it in a future file. Share this one with the friend in your life who orders the same drink every single day without ever asking the question James just asked. Next time, James is standing in a completely different kind of line. This one at a warehouse the size of several football fields, staring at a hot dog that has cost the exact same price for decades, in a company that could have raised that price 100 times over and never did. Why would a business protect a loss on purpose? That's the next business file.